Welcome to the world of Middle-earth role-playing. I'm your host, Roman Daesel, and today we're going to be looking at Dunland and the Southern Misty Mountains. I picked this up from Endless Adventure back in 1989 for like 18 or 20 bucks, can't remember. And this book was first released in 1987, so it's a first edition copy. And you get the journey to the rugged foothills that rise to the north of the Old South Road. Strife is the rule of Dunland. The warlike Dunnish clans jealously guard their independence and often stage raids against their neighbors and even their own kinsmen. Yet Dunland is less hazardous than the southern Misty Mountains, where even the hardiest adventurers run afoul of giants, elves, trolls, and even dragons. Alright, so you get to explore Ayman Lind and Elven Fortress, the lair of Turokulen the Worm, and Dunlin Trade Center of Dunland. I was pretty excited to get this book because this is an area that Tolkien refers to the Dunlendings on multiple occasions in his works, but never really goes into great detail about what they're like. The closest he does that is in Unfinished Tales. In the Battle of the Fords of I.C.E, he mentions how they sometimes will get armor and weapons, but doesn't go into great detail about their culture and that, other than that they're descendants of the Daen Coentis who used to live in the White Mountains and were part of the Oathbreaker, so they're related to them. So this book is divided into two sections. It's going to be divided into Dunland and then the Southern Misty Mountains. So it does come with some 4 full-colored pages. So it does come with 4 full-color page maps as well as major layouts. It goes into the Dunnish clans and the other inhabitants. So let's take a look at the maps first. The first map is the regional map that shows Dunfermline up here. You have Rowan down in the corner with Fangorn Forest, Isengard, Helm's Deep, and then the Fords of Isen. This module mainly deals with Dunfermline and this area. There's Lerach, Dunman. It makes sense there would be a trading town in Dunland, where merchants from Gondor, Arnor, later Arthedain, Cardolan, the dwarves, and even the Rohirrim could go and trade with the Dunmen somewhere, in some shape or form. As well as the Dunnish tribes could go somewhere that would be considered neutral ground and trade with each other. So it does make sense for that. And you flip this thing over, and you get 2 pages. You get a layout of Lerach Dunman and a basic color area map key. And then for some reason you get a black and white of the same thing, but smaller. I don't know why they threw this in. It would have been cooler to have another regional map or more layouts. A layout of the Fords of Isen would have been cool. So that's the first map. Second color map, I don't know what they were thinking. They gave you a central Rhydor, central Arnor with Eregion. There were Dunnish clans in Rudar at the time, and probably in Cardolan. And they were used as mercenaries during the wars of the sister states and during the Angmaren wars. But more by and large, this module doesn't deal with them, so I don't know why they have this map. But this is the better map on the other side. Here you get the fauna, so you have your grass cats, wolves, wargs, and stuff like that. But you also get the clans. The Dobak, the Eralt, the Triforn, Leon, Ruoth, and so on and so on. Firgen. So you get a regional map of where the clans are located, and as well as some key sites. So again, you have Agranos, which is the servants of Saruman, or Isengard. Orc. Dweitho here is Eerie. You get the lair of Turokulen, which is the dragon. Ayman Lind is up here, which is the Elven Fortress, as well as the Giant's Home, which I can't see on the map there, but it's there somewhere. And you even get a site called Isildur's Tomb. So going back to this book, just looking at the front cover, Iron Crown made the Dunnish more like Brythonic tribes before the Romans came, or Irish tribes. I know in Britain, before the Romans came, they were big on chariots, so they look more like pre-Roman British tribes. So let's go through the book. Not going to go through the first parts, which is all converting spells. Gives you the brief timeline of the Second and Third Age. There's not much recorded history in this time period, but it does talk about the religious strife among the Daen Coentis in the White Mountains because of the rise of the dark cults in the Second Age. So many Daen Coentis migrate north to Rhydor, settling mostly in Dunland and Rudar. Large groups migrate to escape the fear caused by the Oath. The Menabri are also probably related to the Dunlendings. And it also mentions the last alliance, when the Daen Coentis are called by the alliance, they are refused, bringing the curse of the Oathbreaker. So the people of Dunland are related to those people. Now it does talk about when the Hobbits come to Dunland. Stewart Hobbits, one of 3 tribes of Hobbits, and they settle in Dunland and around Tharbad before moving on to the Shire. And it gives great detail into the wars with Rohan, who they called the Thieves, because the Dunnish tribes were moving into Calenarden at the time, and until Syrian, Stewart of Gondor, gave all of the province of Calenarden to the Rohirrim, to the Ethiods, as a gift for saving them. And the Dunnish tribes resented that, especially when the Rohirrim later came in and pushed them out across the fords of Isen and into Dunland, and also took over the West March. So that's the timeline. Then it gives the history of the Dunlendings, who are called the Daen Coentis, or people of skill. Though they're not as sophisticated as the Dunedain, obviously. You got society and everyday life, how they dwell. Squat, windowless structures with stone walls and wood-framed roofs. They're thatched or covered with stretched hides. So a very, wouldn't say primitive, but not exactly a high society. Definitely a dark age type of society. Commerce and crafts, religion. So they're a very superstitious people. Tolkien mentions that they consider when the hobbits are returning home after the War of the Ring, they go through Dunland with all the elves with them. Gandalf and Elrond, the sons of Elrond and Galadriel. And the Dunnish people flee and hide because they think elves are like spirits or ghosts. So they're very superstitious. Goes in the military structure of the clans is very loose. Unfinished Tales gives a better description of it. High quality weapons and armor are something that most Dunnish tribesmen don't have, so they steal it from... It's either stolen or plundered from battlefields or won in combat. Weapons would be handed down from generation to generation. Gives a physical appearance. So they're short for men, 5'8" to 6'4". Women range average 5'6". So they're not as tall as the Rohirrim, and they're not as tall as the Dunedain. Then they have what's called an oral tradition. They're xenophobic and isolationist because Dunland never created an empire, a kingdom of its own. They're broken down into clans and tribes. And Tolkien's works also mention that there's no real organization. Oral tradition was one of the things they have. That's something that the Irish, the Welsh, and the British had before had. Next up, we're going to the southern Misty Mountains. It's going to talk about climate, flora, and fauna. Nothing huge there, you know. So southern Misty Mountains are anything from south of Moria all the way to the Gap of Rowan. Then we have Dunland itself with its climate, flora, the fauna again. And then we go to south. We jump right into politics and power. So this is 1640, which is most MERP books use as their template. They use this time period. It has Turokulen the Worm. He's a small dragon, easily bullied up in the Grey Mountain when he was born in the Grey Mountains. Bullied around, so he flew south. Found his own little home. And he found a home and managed to get wealthy by simply stealing from travelers in the mountains. So whatever wealth they had, and he's accumulated a small hoard. Because he's so small, he's not seen as a big threat. He also has contacts with the elves of Ayman Lind, and he's now in the prime of his life. He's not large as many younger dragons, but he's more agile. He's 30 feet long, blue-black in color. Wings are small, can carry approximately 1 mile in a straight flight or 2 to 3 miles of gliding. He's a fire drake with a short-ranged breath weapon. Extremely hot and well-controlled. So he is dangerous, but he's not as dangerous as, let's say, Smog. Not nearly as dangerous, but not something you want to tackle on your own. Then we get to Ayman Lind. These are elves, mostly Noldorn, who before the downfall of Ost-in-Edel and the departure of Anatar, they decided to leave over concerns over personal freedom, which is being hindered by society. They had projects they wished to work on without fear of interference from their masters. They left quickly, with only close friends and servants. So they built a small citadel high on the western side of the Misty Mountains. In the northern area of Dunland, recruited some of the giants to help in the building process, which took some 50 years. Okay, so they're outcast. Their experiments are probably not considered normal. This is all fictional MERP stuff. That and the dragon that's in the area. And then it gives a description of all the various elves you'll find. Solcano, Helkama, Theamiri, Lelith, Mortimer, Elendil. Now Elendil's interesting because he creates weapons. So he's taking animal stock with human stock and mixing it. So it's kind of like the island of Dr. Morneau. And he creates these weapons. So he's playing God. Kind of like what Morgoth and Sauron did. And Saruman did. So it's nothing new there. But he's going to burn in hell for that when he does get to the Undying Lands. So his intentions were probably better than the other three aforementioned. Then there's giants. Tolkien does mention giants in The Hobbit. And I always think the giants are like the giants you see in C.S. Lewis's works. They're big, clumsy. Not the ones you saw in Peter Jackson's movie where they're like rock elementals. These ones are more like just normal giants doing normal things. Other than that, he doesn't mention them in too many other works. Then, of course, the giant eagles are scattered throughout the mountain ranges. Giant eagles show up in The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, and Lord of the Rings, so it makes sense that there'd be some in the Southern Misty Mountains. Now, the Southern Misty Mountains does not see any great dwarven homes being built. Moria was probably was the only one, and that's more in the central Misty Mountains. There's no real dwarven presence around the Isengard area or around Fangorn, which is kind of strange. You think the Misty Mountains would have so much untapped resources. Even the orcs don't have a lot of holds in the southern Misty Mountains. The orcs are more concentrated up in the north and central Misty Mountains. So the southern Misty Mountains between 1640 and 319 doesn't change much. Turokulen goes off to sleep. There's still trade is stopped between the giants and the elves of Ayman Lind. Not many dwarves come around, and things change. One of the elves of Ayman Lind goes to the White Council, and the eagles are still there. It's during the War of the Ring that things change a little, with more orcs being in the region, and the Dunlanders becoming more hostile, and Saruman's presence being felt. Okay, then we go next into Dunlin Politics. So 1640, it gives a list of the clans, and where they're located, how big they are, what their alliances or allegiances lie. 15 major clans in the Dunnish region, and several smaller ones on the peripheries. And this gives a clan chart of who hates each other, who's cold, cool, indifferent, warm, friendly, or allied. There's 2 major groups competing with influence among those who are not yet aligned. And this goes into a list of those ones. So then we got the 2 major units. There's the Daen Iontis, which means rejected, possessed, betrayed, wronged. And they want to return, and they want to join up with the dark cults. So it is Sauron's influence among them is great. And then you have the Daen Coentis, who want to become more like their ancestors and live like they did years ago. So these are the 2 major factions fighting and trying to gain influence within Dunland itself. The Daen Iontis, obviously, they will side with Saruman during the War of the Ring, and will provide the bulk of his managed troops, while the Daen Coentis will stay out of it. There are some Dunedain living not far away from Dunland, mostly near Tharbad, and some will live close to Larrick Dunman, and will only travel in large groups. In 1640, there were probably more Dunedain, but by the War of the Ring, there are none. No Dunedain in the region. Then we have the Temple of Justice, which is the Daen Iontis focal point, and a guy named Mabon, who's charismatic, and at the time of his arrival, many Dunlanders see him as a messiah, and see him as a great spiritual leader, but this guy was sent by the Dark Lord in Dol Guldur to reinforce the hatred that Dunlanders feel towards the Dunedain and their allies. So this is a peripheral region for Sauron, trying to put more pressure on the Dunedain and cut off all routes between Arthedain and Gondor. Now it says he has a ring of power, a lesser ring of power, but then for some reason Merp always you can find these rings that give you more life and stuff. No, Sauron, there's only 20 rings of power. There might have been lesser rings, but he wouldn't hand them out like candy. So this is one of those things that Merp takes creative license with. Then we have the Stewart Hobbits, but by 1640 their numbers had decreased as the plague and most go to the Shire. You have what's something called the Healer's Hall, which would be more in line with the Daen the Daen Coentis. Traders and smugglers, bards who would be much in demand. Then Dunland from 1640 to 2510, it remains unchanged. The Daen Iontis continue to grow in power, while the Daen Coentis continue to grow in skill, becoming more civilized. Trade through Dunland declines through these years, particularly after the fall of Arthedain in 1974, and then later the fall of Moria. Trade would definitely have collapsed. It's the Daen Iontis who move into the Westfold and range further and further in what's been Calenarden. So from 2510 to 2759, this is the beginning of the Rohirrim phase, and the 2 clans become friendly with the hereditary forces of Gondor at Isengard, because Isengard was still a Gondorian property and had a garrison that became hereditary over time. It was an isolated Gondorian outpost shortly after the fall of Arthedain and the fall of the kings. So during the time of the Stuarts, it was hereditary, and the Dunlanders basically took over. The Rohirrim were not able to get them out, and a war was sparked with Rohan when a large landowner in the West March, who had Dunnish blood in him, called Freka, who claimed to be a descendant of one of the kings of Rohan, wanted to marry his son Wolf with the daughter of King Helm, the Hammerhand. King Helm killed Freka with a blow from his fist. So Wolf, the son of Freka, he fled Rohan and spent 4 years recruiting men from the clans of Dunland to his cause. So most of them were Daen Iontis. And when Corsairs invaded Gondor in 2750 and Easterlings invaded Rohan from across the Anduin, Wolf deemed that the time was right, and he invaded. They attacked Rohan's forces at the fords of Isen, and were joined by a force of Southerners that were in league with the Corsairs that had landed on the Gondorian coast. So they defeated the Rohirrim, but then in the fell winter, a lot of them died, as well as many Rohirrim who were taking refuge in Helm's Deep and in Dunharrow. And when Helm died and his 2 sons were already dead during the conflict, Helm's sister's son surprised Wolf at Meduseld and killed him and defeated the Dunlendings. They were retreated back, and Gondor came back with aid. And that was the end of that threat. Dunland from 2759 to 318. Time of reorganization, rebuilding among the clans that lasted for nearly 200 years. And raids against the Rohirrim during that period would have been small and rare. Persecution of the Daen Coentis decreased, and more clans took up that way. Now, Saruman the White had been given the keys to Orthanc because the Dunlanders had been forced out by the Gondorians as they returned. And Saruman, when he became more corrupt, he made friends with the clan leaders and raised an army. Now, Merp gives a figure of 4,000 Dunlanders within the circle of Orthanc by the time of the War of the Ring. And he probably did crossbreed Dunlendings with orcs to produce his half-orcs. And then after that, Dunland, King Elisar, after the War of the Ring, Aragorn, King Elisar, he granted the Dunlendings the land south of the Glandun, north of the Isen, and west of the Gwathlo to the Misty Mountains, as long as they lived peacefully. And this would be the time of their prosperity. Okay, so that's a brief timeline of that. Next we go into sites of interest in the southern Misty Mountains. The Giants' homes. So the Giants live in clans. They would have the miners who would do some mining work, and then the ranchers who would do herding work. And they're basically in families. So they would have like goats, sheep, and cullocks, which would be like maybe deer, a type of deer, or mountain goat. Interesting anyway. Next we get Ayman Lind, which is like a fortress in the sky. It reminds me of Flash Gordon type style. One of the elves in Ayman Lind also prefix air travel. He has I wouldn't quite call it a hot air balloon, but I wouldn't also call it a zeppelin. Something like that. Like I said, Merp, they took a lot of creative licensing with Ayman Lind, and I would definitely treat it as fictional. The layout's pretty cool when you look at it. Has north-south towers, gatehouse. Your typical Merp fortress. It's got a main keep and all the various levels and traps and rooms. I actually never used this as a campaign module myself. Me and my friends, we never used this one. I just never seemed to get around to it. It was a little too much to delve into Tolkien's world like this. See, there's a view of Ayman Lind, so it's in the sky and it's on a cliff, which doesn't sound not something you want to do. Now, the lair of Turokulen, I send guys to try to kill the dragon because it's a lesser dragon and get all his treasure. So that was pretty cool to try, and there really isn't that much treasure there. Okay, then we have Isildur's tomb. Now, I.C.E has taken this a little bit too far in that Saruman's servants in their search for the One Ring found the body of Isildur. I highly doubt that. That's almost 3,000 years. And bones like that would have long been swept. And the picture has like a body. I highly doubt that too. But it is mentioned in Unfinished Tales. When King Elisar was crowned in Gondor and began the reordering of his realm, he began the restoration of Orthanc, and then all the secrets of the tower were searched. Behind a hidden door they could not have found or opened had not Elisar had the aid of Gimli the dwarf, a steel closet was revealed. It had been intended to receive the ring, but it was almost bare. In a casket on a high shelf, 2 things were laid. One was a small case of gold attached to a fine chain. It was empty, and bore no letter or token, but beyond all doubt had once borne the ring of Isildur's neck. Next to it lay a treasure without price, the long mourned is lost forever, the Elendimir, the white star of elvish crystal upon a fillet of mithril, descended from Silmarillion to Elendil as a token of royalty in the north. So that's the story that you find in the Unfinished Tales. So it's certainly the Elendimir could not have been found unless they had been upon Isildur's body when he sank. So Isildur did not fall in deep water. So that's when it talks about bones. Well, Ice is taking this and saying, okay, one of the eagles, great eagle, happened to be flying over, took the bones and laid them out to bury. And he was carrying a seed of the white tree with him at the same time. So you have Isildur's grave up in the mountains and you have a white tree sapling. Okay, I don't know why you want to go there, but hey. Then you have Eagle Eyrie of Dwathathir. So those are some of the that's the southern Misty Mountains part. And then you go into the actual Dunland sites. Larrick Dunman. The Fiergan clan hold is there. Chieftain's Tower, a small amphitheater, common market. An observatory for half Dunedain and half Dunnish, okay. Inn Herbalist. I've had guys a party going to Dunland on their way somewhere else, so that's not a big deal. It's pretty cool. The Carewood, it's kind of like one of the Daen Coentis clans got some droogs or wozes to come back to this forest. And you go into a Stewart village of New Marish, which would be by Tharbad. A smuggler's hold, kind of like the one you see in the Rohirrim book. You'd figure there'd be smugglers in this area. Then you have the Healer's Hall in the village of Cillian. Nothing too special. If you get hurt, that's a good place to go. Palamiri's estate, so a Dunedain estate, just 20 miles from Tharbad, on the outskirts of Dunland. It'd be a typical estate for a Dunedain. Then you have the Temple of Justice high up in the hills. So this is kind of cool. I sent a party here to try and infiltrate it and kill as many of the dark priests as possible. Again, there would have been... Sauron would have sent his followers out into the world to try and convert people. So that's not exactly anything new. Now, adventures in the Misty Mountains. You got Call from Singing Hill, looking for a group of adventures not daunted by tales of a haunting. So this one talks about Ayman Lind, the elvish fortress that's up in the mountains, which sings. Trading with giants. Assault on a lazy dragon, which is the one we tried. Finding a southern pass. So a lot of people would like to find a southern pass. That makes sense. It's kind of like the old Northwest Passage in Canada. And you want to try and find a safe passage through the southern mountains. But that would pretty much take you into Fangorn Forest, so I don't know how safe that would be. Dunland Adventures would be a troll hunt. Mission for the King. Sacrifice for justice. And the one I've done a lot is a clan war. Clan wars are fun. And of course you get your master encounter tables, master beast tables. Then we go to the one I love. This is when you do a clan war. The master military table. All the clans and all their might. So a typical clan has a chieftain. They have a clan guard. The elite warriors, who are the most experienced ones. Adult warriors. Then young warriors. And it's listed by each clan. Some clans are better at warfare than others. So Clan Traforn and Clan Arelit, who are the rivals, they would have some of the best soldiers. It also gives you the Temple of Justice, how many men they'd have. And then the estates, a typical Dunedain estate would have a guard captain and maybe 20 men-at-arms. Then it has the Druidain, the Wozes, as well as the elves of Ayman Lind. So there's only not many elves in Ayman Lind. Most of them are the officers would be Noldor, and the retainers would be various elves, mostly Sindar and Noldorin. And finally you have the Master NPC table. So you get Turokulen, the winged drake, the elves of Ayman Lind, the giant ranchers and the giant miners, and finally Dunland's significant clan leaders, and other people from the Carewood, the Healer's Hall, and the Temple of Justice, as well as the Smuggler's Hold. And that's it. That's Dunland in a nutshell. I didn't really like this book that much as far as the adventures go. The elves of Ayman Lind, the Temple of Justice, kind of dumb. The giants, kind of a dumb thing. The idea of a southern dragon, yeah, not really. What I liked best was the Dunnish tribes and tribes fighting tribes, or clans fighting clans. Because when they do this in 1640 time period, you use it for any time period, and you try and say, well, let's change history. What if the Daen Coentis had beaten the Daen Iontis, and then Saruman might not have gone the way he did? What if Saruman had not gone the way he did? What if he had stayed in Isengard and then tried to unite the Dunlendings to become a force for good, or even a force and use their army to help the Rohirrim and the Gondorians, and thus earn the respect of those people? It would have been much better. It was a possibility. So the possibilities are there to do something better with the military, make Dunland an actual kingdom. But anyway, it's not one of my favorite modules, but it was interesting. You see, I haven't played it that much. It's still in pretty good condition. I like the maps because it connects with other maps. Anyway, anyone out there who actually has this module and played it, let me know what you guys thought of it. Hit the like button, subscribe, do whatever, bell button for notifications. I'm going to go through the whole collection. And until next time, this has been Roman Day Slime out here.
Black Riders played the